I'm Maddy Harland from Permaculture magazine, and I'm at Applewood Permaculture Centre, where we have been engaged with the Peace course, which is Peace, Empowerment and Cultural Emergence. And I'm delighted to be with Starhawk this week. We've talked a lot about activism and grounding activism and collaboration and conflict resolution this week, Starhawk, and I'm very aware that you've been an activist for 5 decades or more.
Something like that.
Something like that. So, and I'm also aware that we have this new wave of activists engaging, particularly with the climate emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you advise them to help grow their movements and make it as successful as it possibly can be as a movement?
Well, first I just want to say I am so grateful and so excited that there is this amazing movement and that so many young people are speaking up and taking the lead. Just bless them. It is really such a gift to all of us. What I would say when I first started as an activist, I was 15, and it was the era of the Vietnam War. And to recognize that activism can be a lifelong commitment, but to make it a lifelong commitment, you've got to be sure you also take care of yourself. That you're acting not just out of rage and fear, even though those are very real emotions in these times, but also acting out of a vision, knowing what it is you want as well as what you don't want, and acting out of that love and that passion to bring that beautiful world into being that we know we could have and still could have in spite of everything. For me, I spend a lot of my activist time now actually teaching permaculture, teaching a program we're calling regenerative land management, so that people know what the solutions are and have the tools and skills to put them into place. Because I think that's absolutely vital. If we don't know what we're fighting for, we're not going to be as effective. The other thing is, when we think about a political movement can be a welcoming place, and it's far more effective when it is. As activists, we have to understand human needs. Too often we create a movement for humans as if, the way we think they should be, but not really the way they are. I had a writing teacher who used to say if he didn't like somebody's piece, he'd say, he writes about people as if he'd heard of them but never really met any. Sometimes I think we organize that way. Right? To stop and think, what do we need as humans? We need a sense of belonging. We need to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We need to feel a sense of agency, a sense that we're doing something that has an impact, that makes a contribution. And we also need to feel seen and valued for what we bring. When I've been in movements that have offered people those opportunities, they've been tremendously effective. So thinking about a movement that's welcoming is one that says to people, you can belong. If we have a movement that says you can't belong because you don't have the right, politics, you don't have the right jargon, you don't have the right perspective, we're going to lose. It's not our job as activists, as tempting as it is, to just sit back and whine about how bad other people are, or how bad their analysis is, or how they're not courageous enough, or they're not. It's our job to figure out how to inspire them and how to educate them. So if we do that, we need to find a way to say to somebody, hey, come and join us. This is your home. If you have a longing for justice, if you have a longing for a world in balance, if you long to be part of making that world come into being whoever you are, whatever your gifts are, there's a place for you. And this is your home. Welcome to it. You are part of this, and you are needed, because we do need everybody's gifts. Political change, cultural change, it's like an ecosystem. There's multiple niches. We need those people who'll be the frontline, hardline activists, and who'll go to the barricades and then go over the barricades. But we also need the people who are going to be feeding the people, right? Who are going to be taking the video of the people at the barricades, the ones who's going to be writing the press releases, the ones who's going to be educating the children, the ones who are going to be doing the street theater, the ones who are going to run for office, the ones who are going to negotiate with their public officials, the ones who are going to try to talk to the police and de-escalate them. The ones who are going to set up the trauma healing space for the activists when they come back from the barricades. That's all part of creating change. And everybody has gifts. Yours might be very different from mine, but they're all needed.
Get ready, guys.
And you talked about it in terms of an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, we have wolves,
Yeah.
and then we have the rabbits. And
Yeah.
I really loved seeing it in terms of that interconnected whole.
Yeah,
Different people.
Too often, we're always saying like, oh, you aren't really an activist, you aren't courageous enough, you're not taking the highest level of risk, you aren't really doing it. And it's kind of like saying, we want an ecosystem that's all wolves. And what would happen? They'd starve to death and fight each other, right? The wolves only can be wolves because there's far more rabbits than wolves. And the rabbits can only be rabbits if there's a lot of grass and greenery. So instead of telling people you should do things the way I do it, stopping and saying, oh, okay, your approach, the thing that you're doing, how can that reinforce what I'm doing? How can what I'm doing support what you're doing? And when we've done that, we've been very, very effective. I remember in 2005 when the World Trade Organization met in Cancun, we had what we called an inside-outside strategy. We had people outside protesting, we had encampments, we had people going up to the barricades, we had contingents of campesinos from all over Latin America and Mexican students and internationals. There was a group of Korean farmers who came, who the head of their delegation actually committed ritual suicide at the barricades. It was a very powerful and dramatic act. And at the same time, we had people who were going into the meetings, and part of the NGOs that had a seat at the table and were negotiating inside the meetings. And between the two, we were able to shut that meeting down. And a lot of the Global South ended up walking out, in part because they had support both inside and outside. So we can be tremendously effective when we work in coalition and when we honor that principle we talk about in permaculture of diversity brings resilience, instead of trying to make everybody do the same thing.
We've talked a lot this week about the children and the unborn future generations, and I wondered if you could frame that within a lens of future care, and also within a lens of a more traditional, ancient approach to how we look after our community, our society.
John Young was talking about the tradition of the Six Nations in the U.S., the Iroquois and Confederacy, and how when their chiefs deliberate, they look at everything through the lens of how will this impact the future generations, 7 generations on. And to me, that's part of future care. I like that framing for that third permaculture principle, partly because It sort of balances the other two, but also I think it encompasses the idea of fair share, the idea of reinvesting surplus, of limiting consumption. Those are all ways that we actually care for the future and provide a future for those generations to come. So I think when we look at our decisions and what we do, we have a responsibility to those future generations and to be thinking about them and to be saying, how are these decisions going to affect the world that they're going to inherit?
Thank you very much. Thank you.